Hello and welcome to Dumfries Carnival's safety induction for any of our volunteers or staff or practitioners who are working. We're one team here at Electronica and we're a community interface. So right now you're part of our team and we'll refer to you as our crew. Now, as much as I love creativity and as much as I love inspiring people, in order for our work to sustain well into the next 20-30 years, which it will by the way, we have to make sure that you understand some of the safety features on board this inspirational aircraft that we are calling Dumfries Carnival. As a volunteer, you're covered by our employer's liability insurance. And we've got cover for up to 300 volunteers, which means that while you're volunteering for us, you're covered basically. So if something was to happen to you, we would be able to, the organisation would be covered. So if, for example, it was an incident, we would be able to afford the compensation. But in order for us to fulfil that compensation, we need you to understand certain things. And the first thing is we need you to complete training. Well, that's okay because you're doing that right now and you're taking part in the training, which means that you're qualified to go out there and cut up all the material and use those glue sticks. The second thing is that if ever anything happens to you, if you cut your finger or if you get a hot glue burn incident, although you might think that's quite trivial, we actually need you to record that. And you can log on to our website, it's just coming up in a little second. Log on to our website and you can complete that. And what that does, that'll send a notification to us that something's happened. Now, even if you haven't actually required any first aid or whether you haven't actually needed to seek medical help, we actually have a responsibility as an organisation to keep recording that incident rate. Because what we do is we look at that as a team and we try and think of ways that we can prevent that. And we have looked at all costs at how we can prevent that. And the third thing that's really important in the given circumstance that we're in this environment is that when you receive your boxes, it would be proactive for you to give them a wee sanitise down, give them a wipe down. You'll get some sanitizer wipes with you. As soon as you get them, please make sure that you give them a little wipe down and that you are conscious of that. Sometimes you'll be working with chemicals. The chemicals that we work with are most likely to be glues, and we have a responsibility for you to be aware of COSH, and for those that have done our safety training before, that's the control of substances that are hazardous to health. What I would encourage you to do, and we'll keep showing you where these are, is when there is actually a chemical or glue you're using, have a look at the safety data sheet for that chemical. Now, I can tell you that the risks in using our glue guns are very minimal. The obvious one is that you're going to get burnt because it's quite hot glue, but of course if you were to consume that or eat that, then there are some first aid measures that are there that you'll be able to implement straight away. Firstly, if this does happen to you, make sure that you follow the data sheet there, but give us a ring on 01387 733 717 immediately, and that's our operations centre, and they'll be able to take your details and make sure that we know what's happening and give you some advice thereafter. The best thing to do is not to panic. The second thing to think about in terms of the space is to just consider preparedness. If you're about to make some costumes, perhaps look at the space that you're working with and think about any obstructions that are there. Make sure the space is nice and clear, and obviously if there's someone else in the space, have a chat with them and let them know that you're going to be cutting up costumes. But I would encourage you to do a sort of mini risk assessment of the space you're about to use, even if it's something that you're going to be going in and out of that afternoon. And of course we don't all have extra space, so maybe actually think about communicating that with your family or friends, whoever in the space, that you're going to be using that space, and just think about the materials that you're going to be using and what physical activities you'll be doing. For example, if you're cutting up something that's quite large or you're moving things around, we don't want to knock things over. So do have a little look at the space that you're using to make sure that it's ready. In each of the tools that you're using, our designer Katrina will give you a toolbox talk. It's a very quick video, but it basically gives you the safety procedures for all of the equipment that you're using. If you're in any doubt about the equipment that you're using, give us a shout and we'll talk you through it. Don't accept that we've given you all the instructions if you're not quite clear. Actually, have a little think about what you're expected to do and give us some feedback about that. We want you to be absolutely sure that you know how to use that equipment. I should say the equipment you're using will be quite limited to glue guns, scissors, Stanley blades or heat guns, and sometimes some of our heavy duty staple guns. In terms of PPE, I'm sure you're really well informed now about PPE. For us, if you're using heat guns or glue guns, we're going to give you safety goggles. I would ask you to wear them when you're using them, just in case you get any spats in your eyes. And if you're using any of the Stanley blades, we will provide you with gloves, so please consider using those at all times. We know they can be uncomfortable when you're cutting, but we've provided them for your use, and it does actually prevent accidents. Other than that, please think about how you're storing the costumes until we collect them again, and they'll be collected by you putting them inside ready-made bags which you can seal, and you'll leave these on your doorstep. You're more than welcome to wave at Diane or any of the logistics team who are picking them up, but we would encourage you to keep the door closed just in the given environment right now that we're trying to sort of control the spread of infections. But when you're storing the costumes in your house, please don't store them next to your halogen heater, for example, although it will get quite cold. Try and think about where you're storing them. We do prefer them to be in a dry place, but if you don't have a dry place in the house, then an outside area would be okay. Do have a look in case there's any pests or infestations there, because we don't want poor Marin having a very big shock when she opens that bag 2 months later and there's a family of mices that have crawled in with your fantastic costumes. Other than that, the rest is really obvious. Just take your time. When you get the instructions, if you're like me, I'm not a crafter. I love doing it when they let me, but they don't let me do it very often. Ask the questions because the professionals are there. Diane's on hand all the time to give you some advice, and if you're finding something a bit too difficult, just let her know.
I will be here to support you throughout this journey with these series of online videos, which you can follow at your leisure. The videos you receive will break down the process in making all different parts of the costume design that you will be responsible for making. Along with your specific video, you'll receive the relevant templates for your design and also the tools and the materials that you need to create. Firstly, I'd like to run through the different tools that you might need, whether or not you will be using them specifically for your design or not. There's not that many to go through, so it's best that you know all the different tools that can and may be needed. So let's get started. As you can see, I wasn't kidding, there really is not that many tools that would be involved in this kind of carnival make. I will go through them regardless of whether or not you will be using all of them. For the most part, you'd likely only be using half of these tools for your part of the make, but I go through them anyway. So firstly, we've got a heat gun, which is a 500-degree hairdryer, for want of a better word. So we really only use this if we're going to be working with foam. It's great for heating up the foam so that you can bend and mold it into different shapes. Then you've got a glue gun, which I'm sure a lot of people are familiar with, may have fears of, because you can get some really bad burns from the glue in these guys. I'll go through the safety of that in a little while. Then you've got a regular blade, come in all different kind of shapes and forms. You want one with a long blade, not the ones with the little short tip on them. I'll go through that in a little while. Then we have the regular scissors, and we have a fabric scissors. And the only difference in a regular scissors and fabric scissors is generally fabric scissors is better quality. And what I do is I tie a little piece of fabric onto the fabric scissors so that you don't get confused during a make and go and grab these scissors and cut them, use them to cut something that's going to blunt them. You want to keep your fabric scissors pretty good. You've also got a rotary cutter. This is only for using with fabric and at a specific kind of cutting as well. Usually in the fashion world they would use this for cutting around their patterns, but we won't use it for that. We're just going to use it to make strips. It's very handy and very fast. But again, you'd only use this on a cutting mat, because the cutting mat can absorb the blade properly and not blunt it. For your own table, you're going to need something that covers your surface so that you're not cutting anything with a blade onto your table. So you want a protective surface. A piece of board is the best because it doesn't slice and dice when you start using your blade on it. So how can we minimize the risk of glue gun burns? Well, there's 3 things that you can do. One is how you apply your glue. So a lot of people, when they're using a glue gun, even people that I know that have been working for many years, they'll pour the glue gun on, absolutely loads of glue, and they'll lash 2 pieces of glue together. And what'll happen is when you put lots of glue on, you'll put your pieces together and it'll spill out over the edges. That is what causes the most glue gun burns when you're using one. So one of the things that you can do is when you're using the gun, you're going to touch the tip of the glue gun onto whatever surface that you're gluing, alright? If you're gluing from up here, you have no control over where that glue is going, okay? So once you put that onto the surface, you spread it around. Now that does 2 things. It spreads it around so that it dries a little bit faster, and also as it's spreading it out and you put the other piece on the top, it minimizes the risk of any spillage out the edges. As you can see, there's nothing out the edges here, okay? And that actually dries faster then, okay? So that is pretty much stuck, okay? So the second thing you can do to minimize your glue gun burns, actually that is the big one, okay? That the big one is spreading out your glue, no matter what you're doing and what you're trying to glue together, unless you're doing something absolutely huge. But I don't really think you guys will be doing anything like that. So spread out that glue. The second thing you can do is if you're working on something quite small, so say you end up having to stick lots of little pieces together, you stick your glue down, you spread it out, and then you pop your little piece down on the top, and you pick up something like a pencil or a pen or a stick, and you press that glue down. So you can see the stuff coming out the edges there that could easily have caught your fingers. So you're kind of using like a dabbing technique, so you're going to use something to push that down. If you don't want to be constantly grabbing something to stick something down, you can use a little bit of masking tape. And what you do is you pick one of the fingers that you're going to be using to dab, and you just really loosely, it's not tight at all, so really loosely put some masking tape around the tip of your finger, so that when you're putting down your glue, and if you're putting your finger down on top, you'll feel the heat but you won't get a burn, okay? Now I don't know if you can see on the video, there's lots of little strings coming off the glue. That'll never burn you. Those strings are harmless. They're annoying, but they're harmless. Okay, so if you spread out your glue, you use something to dab, or you cover your fingers, you will minimize your risk of getting a glue gun burn. There's very obvious things too, like don't glue something up really high. You know, always bring the thing down to the table that you're trying to glue, if that's possible, because gravity, basically. So if you're gluing something up high, there's a high chance that a big dribble will come off and it'll hit your arm. I've got a few glue gun burns on the back of my arm sometimes, and it's one of the worst places to get a glue gun burn because your skin is really sensitive. So you want to avoid gluing high at all costs, if possible. So here we have some rotary cutters in 3 different kinds here. These 2 came in a set. This is an old one. It's really more basic in its design. So you just slide the plastic back and the blade is exposed. Okay, this one is really blunt now, so it needs to be changed. These 2, as I said, came in a set. The smaller one is really not much good for what we're doing. It actually just a little bit too fiddly, possibly a little bit too cheap. This one is actually quite good. So what you do is you slide back the plastic covering so the blade is exposed, and what you do is you turn the blade towards yourself so you can see where you're going. With the rotary cutter, it's best not to put your fingers on the top like that, because depending on the design, it's a lot easier for your hand to slip onto that blade than if you keep your hands like this. If you hold it kind of like a hammer, definitely works better. So you're going to need a cutting mat to use your rotary cutter, and what we're going to use our rotary cutter for is for making fringing, okay, like this. Okay, it looks brilliant on carnival costumes. It's a bit labor intensive, but it's definitely worth it. So you'll get faster and better the more you do. So you basically just start in one corner, you start really slow, and you come onto your fabric, apply plenty of pressure. You should be able to see it moving already off the mat, so you can see that it's actually cutting. And you're just going to go in thin zigzags. Some people will take to this really easily, other people just won't get their head around it, and that's fine. That's the way life is. So you just zigzag, and when you get better at it, you can get faster at it. Okay? The second you're done, you're going to put the cover back on that again to protect your blade. If that blade falls on the ground, then it's blunt in one part, it's useless. So with any luck, we won't have any blunt parts in this, and these will pull apart really easily. And yes, they do. If you have a blunt part on your blade, it's an absolute nightmare, because every maybe second zigzag that you do will have a part that will have to be cut with the scissors, and it will drive you crazy. So we really only use the rotary cutter on a fabric that won't fray. And I've shown you on this lining actually does fray, so it's not the greatest for the rotary cutter, but things like ripstop is brilliant, because it's like a plasticky fabric, so it doesn't fray. These would eventually fray and stick together, so they wouldn't last too long. So that is your rotary cutter fringing, which looks very cool indeed. So here we have a selection of blades that we may be using in our production. These two are the same, they're just different sizes. This would be a scalpel, so it has a small, short, very fine tip. Okay. And the last one is a rotary cutter, which is a circular blade. This we will use only with fabric. So unless you're doing a fabric project, you're probably not going to have any use for that one. The blades that we use, they're not necessarily always these plastic blades. They can be the better quality blades where you can change the blades. Most blades you buy now will come with extras, okay, so that you can change them. And if you're working with foam, you will need to change your blades often, because even though this is a soft and malleable material, it blunts blades like nobody's business. Okay, so the rotary cutter I'll run through if you're using fabric. The scalpel I just want to show you, so that you're not confusing a scalpel with when I say blade. Scalpel we would rarely use, because it's really for a lot of precision work, and the precision work probably won't exist for these kind of costumes that we're making for street carnival. They're more for things for theatre, or things that are seen really close up. Okay, so that leaves us with our blades. So you want a blade that is long, not the blades that come, the little Stanley ones that are like really short. And the reason why is that you need quite a long blade so that you can really see where you're going when you're cutting your foam. So if you're cutting this long strip of foam, the first thing you need to think about is never putting your hand behind where you are cutting. So if I was cutting here down, my hand should not be here, it should be here. Okay, because you just don't know if you're going to hit something on the table, or if suddenly your blade is going to go a little faster than you want it. If your hand is down here, there's a high chance of your hand getting caught by the blade, which has and will happen. So the second thing is, when you've got your blade extended, we do have a tendency to put our finger on the top of the blade like that. Make sure you're not putting it on the actual blade itself, because even though that's the blunt side, that could give you a cut if you put enough pressure on. So we extend our blades out quite a bit when we're cutting, and then we cut towards ourselves mostly. Okay, and there we go, that is cut. Alright, so always you can keep your hand out of the way, you're not putting your finger on the tip of the blade. They are the two most important things. Another thing, if you're cutting with your blade, and I don't know if this will work with this now. If you're getting really fluffy edges, I'm not sure if the camera will pick that up. If you're getting fluffy edges or bumps in the foam when you're cutting it, it means your blade is ready to be changed. It means that it can't get all the way through and it's kind of scraping the foam as it's going. So yeah, if you're getting really fluffy edges, you're either not putting on enough pressure, so you need to make sure that you're putting on enough pressure to go all the way through. But if you're getting fluffy edges after putting on plenty of pressure, it's time to change your blade. So that is pretty much it with using the blade. Keep your hand away from the direction that you're cutting, apply enough pressure, and don't be tempted to put your fingers on the blade as you're working. Okay, that's it for blades.